Hey everybody, Brian Garcia, meteorologist, National Weather Service, San Francisco Bay Area, Monterey Bay regions. I'm here today to bring you the 2025 summer and fire season outlooks. This is as of today, May 16th, 2025. These forecasts will evolve in time, so always look for the most up-to-date information. So with that, let's hop right into it. We're going to look at these topics over the course of this presentation. We're going to look at what the winter looked like this last winter, some current conditions, summer outlook, fire season outlook, and some tools for the toolbox so you have some things to use and watch as the summer wears on. So looking at the last winter, this is the precipitation map showing the water year to date percent of normals. So the water years track from October 1st through September 30th. This graphic was created May 14th, so it goes through May 14th, Wednesday, May 14th, just a couple days ago. But really the story I just want to show here is up in North Bay. You can see all of those greens, dark greens, some blues in there. That just signifies that they were near normal, above normal, or much above normal. So North Bay got it good this year. And then you slide south of the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, and it starts going into the browns and reds and even deeper the farther south you go, which means that we were below or much below normal. And you can see that in these numbers here in the 70s and 80s. There are a few sites that did hit into the 100% of normal or even higher. So some sites did pick up some precipitation. And of course, some sites are suspect, like 177% of normal. I'm not sure if that's exactly true. But that's a data point that we do have out there. The Santa Lucias do pick up a lot of rain during any of the systems, and the one that came through, I think it was in February, definitely dumped some rain, and we'll look at those. Image in the upper right is from the February system that went through North Bay and flooded the Russian and caused flooding out in the Guerneville area. So definitely some impacts from this winter's precipitation. We're going to go through these charts over the next couple slides for some different areas. This is Santa Rosa specifically. Let's look at the bottom graph first, then we'll look at the temperatures on the top graph. The bottom graph is accumulated precipitation for the water year through from October 1st right on through April 30th. So the brown line is normal, and normal is based on a 30-year climatology, so it gets smoothed. That's the reason that brown line is just nice and smooth. And the green line is what happened in the 2024-2025 water year thus far. And you can see we started kind of flatline, then we had that spike in November, and then kind of flatlined, had a few little systems roll through and pop us up there, and then we flatlined as we went into the new year. And then we had that spike again as we went into February. And then essentially very limited accumulations as we've marched through, March and April. The key here is that this green line is above the brown line, so we are above normal. Temperature-wise, the background brown area here in the back, that is the normals. So the bottom of this brown area is minimum temperature normals, and the top is maximum temperature normals. And again, this just runs from October 1st through the end of April. The blue area beneath are record lows, and the red area above are record highs. The blue bars are what was observed on the given day throughout the course of this time frame. Again, this is Santa Rosa, so you can see the temperatures here relative to normal and extremes. We had a lot of extremes, even some max temperature extremes in early January, set a record there, close to records in other parts of this winter. The minties didn't even get close to records, so we were pretty far off of that. And if you just kind of blur your eyes and look at these blue bars, what you'll see is we spend a lot of time above that max T through the winter and a little bit of time below that min T, but those minimum temperatures, the bottom parts of the blue bars, most of the winter were above that minimum temperature average, which isn't completely out of normal, but we get averages by having these differences, right, over a 30-year climatology period. And to see a lot of space between the bottom of this brown area and the bottom of the blue bars is telling. It just says that the nights were a little bit warmer. And while we might not experience it while we're sleeping, the vegetation experiences out there. It might not go as dormant. It might keep a little bit more life through the winter. It might allow it to spring back to life earlier in the spring. We might get an earlier spring as we warm up. So let's look at some other areas. This is Oakland Museum, one of our long-time climate sites, goes back into the 70s. And this, look at the temperatures here. Temperatures here, again, spending a lot of time above that brown area, some space between the bottom of the blue bars and the bottom of the brown. We did get some cold snaps, even close to matching a record as we got into February at Oakland Museum, but a lot more records in the highs than we did the lows. So a little bit warmer on average than what we'd normally be. Precipitation-wise, check this out. That green line staying right around that brown line. So that brown line is the normal. Remember, 30-year normal. And then once we turn the corner into February, we get past that late January, early February system. And look at this. It just kind of flat lines throughout. And now this green line is below the brown line, which is much different than what we saw in Santa Rosa. So let's go farther south down into San Jose. Same type of pattern with those temperatures up top. Lots of space between the bottom of the blue bars and the bottom of the brown zone there. Again, touching records in many spots, or setting records for max T, but nothing for min T. And then as we look at the precipitation, that brown line, we never crossed the brown line, that normal line in San Jose this winter. So we are below normal. And down into Monterey, down in the Central Coast area, same thing with temperatures. We did get a little bit cooler in some spots than other areas, but still, again, a lot of maximum temperature records throughout the course of the water year so far, and tons of space between the bottom of the brown zone and the bottom of the blue bars. And that for precipitation, look at this. Again, we are well below that normal line, so not as much rainfall down here. So that rain really benefited the North Bay, and not much of the rest of our service area. So whenever we talk about winter, we talk a lot about the El Nino Southern Oscillation, the Southern Oscillation Index. And this is just looking at where we are and where we could potentially go with reference to El Nino and La Nina. Out here on the left, there is a black dot. That is an observation point for the seasonal months of January, February, March. And then you can see that black line going up to this gray square. That gray square is the March observation for the Nino 3.4 sea surface temperature region. And then when we march out the models, you can see the models. If you just kind of blur your eyes, everything kind of stays in this middle zone here, this green zone, not La Nina, not El Nino. So everything looks like we're going to be, well, kind of normal for the Southern Oscillation Index down there along the equatorial Pacific. What's that mean for summer? Well, not much in terms of temperatures or precip or anything like that, but we like to look at this even as we go through spring and into early summer, because it might give us some kind of clue of when we might see some of the first rains, when we can potentially look towards the end of fire season by getting some significant rains, whether they can come early or late, depending upon what pattern really kind of sets up and what kind of El Nino favors a southern storm track during the winter, and La Nina favors a northern storm track during the winter. So whether it's going to be our northern area of responsibility or our southern area of responsibility that gets the beneficial rain. So that's the reason we look at it in the summer. Drought is really kind of the thing that we look at in the summer. On the left here is the current drought monitor map for California. You can see most of the Bay Area is clear. The list is no drought. And got to remember, this is an agricultural and meteorological drought. So in other words, how much water has fallen and how much water is in the soils, and how much the grasses are green and all that sort of stuff. So it's really agricultural and meteorological. This doesn't speak to drinking water per se. That's really kind of based on the counties and the state to determine any sort of drought impacts for drinking water. But here you can see that we're actually looking pretty good for most of the Bay Area. North Bay makes sense. Even going down to the Bay Area is it's not a bad call. But you can start to see that abnormally dry creeping in to Monterey, San Benito, and even a little bit of East Bay there going into Alameda County. So that's starting to have some creep. A year ago this time, pretty much the entire state had nothing to worry about because we got so much rain. That was a wild winter when we were coming out of that winter. Looking at the seasonal drought outlook, so this was released on May 15th and goes through August 31st, so our core summer months. Southern California, all that brown there, and even come up in Central Valley, that is just drought persists. But the rest of us remain in a white area, which is great. It's just no drought. I would not be surprised to see from that previous graph to see the abnormally dry creep a little bit farther north. We'll have to see how long we hold on to that to see if we end up in drought by the end of summer in some areas. So something to watch. All right, so let's get into some summer outlook information. Let me orient you really quick here. On the left, we're going to be looking at temperature outlooks. On the right, we're going to be looking at precipitation outlooks. This first one and this first one only, we're going to be looking at the monthly outlook because the Climate Prediction Center puts out a monthly outlook for the month that's coming up next. Beyond that, we'll be looking at seasonal outlooks, so 3-month averages. So for June here, let's look at temperature over here. When it says above, that means that we have a higher probability of being above normal for whatever parameter is. In this case, it's temperature, and the darker the shading, the higher the probability is. So you can see for most of California, we are in a modestly dark shading. So this is probably about a 50% probability of being above normal for temperature during the month of June. Over here on the right, when we see equal chances, that's the meteorological equivalent of a shrug. There's just no clear signal as to whether or not we're going to be above, below, or norm or near normal for this time frame for precipitation. But you got to remember, in June in our area, precipitation normals are very, very, very low. So even if we're above normal, it doesn't have to be, we still wouldn't be getting much if it said above normal. And if it was below normal, it'd just mean that we'd be zeroed out pretty much for the month of June. But we're in equal chances here, so the main key here is a higher probability of being above normal for temperature. As we get into the seasonal outlook here, these are our core summer months, June, July, August. As we look at this, we have a fairly high probability of being above normal for temperature during our summer months. And then as we look over at precipitation, that is equal chances again. But one of the things that I look at is down here in the desert southwest for the monsoonal moisture to kick in, because typically July and August is when we get into monsoon season, and we start to see a higher probability of being above normal for precipitation here. Not a significantly high probability, but it definitely is showing in the data that we have a higher probability of being above normal for precipitation there. That's something we'll have to watch for potential fires, and I'll talk about that here in just a moment. Again, July, August, September, as we go towards the end of summer and start creeping into fall. Again, high probability of being above normal for temperature during this time frame, and equal chances for us. But this monsoonal moisture kind of sitting down here with higher probability of being above normal for precipitation. We watch this to see if there's any wobble east-west in this monsoonal moisture, because this monsoonal moisture can feed into California, especially the southern Sierra. But if it gets far enough to the west and even feeding off into the southern Sierra, and we get some kind of area of low pressure off our coast, we can actually drag some of that moisture up across the Bay Area. And the problem is with that, when we do that, we typically pull in mid to high level moisture. And if that ends up being convective, in other words, if it is thunderstorms and it has a high base to that thunderstorm, meaning that the bottom of the thunderstorm is at high elevation, we can get, we'll see virga, so rain coming out of the bottom of the cloud, but because we're so warm, it'll evaporate before it ever hits the ground. And if they're thunderstorms, we can get lightning out of those storms that do go cloud to ground. And without any precipitation, that's what we call a dry thunderstorm. So we'll have to watch that as we get into July and August, especially for potential dry thunderstorm activity, and see what happens in that realm. So why does all this matter? Why does summer heat matter? Well, because it dries things out. The hotter we are, the longer we're hot, the drier we are, the longer we're dry, the more things get dried out. So we end up with very dry grasses, and if you look around the Bay Area, we're already drying out pretty significantly. All the hills are, like the East Bay Hills, the Diablo Range is pretty much already brown, so we're drying out pretty effectively. But that heat, it evaporates the moisture out of the soils, and it causes transpiration out of the vegetation. So it dries out the vegetation through a process when you lump those two together called evapotranspiration. So that is occurring right now, and we don't want heat waves because that makes it happen faster. It cures the fuels faster and puts us in the fire season faster. And speaking of fire season, let's look at those months. So we look at August typically for any sort of lightning outbreak. That's kind of like in 2020 when we had all the fires, the CZU, LNU, SCU, and others. That was from a dry thunderstorm outbreak across the area. Prior to that, so when we're looking at June, July, we're typically talking grass fires, so none of the big fuels, but even grass fires can run fast and cause evacuations. So as we go into as we start to get into the fire season, which is really October for our area, but this is August, September, October seasonal temperature outlook, higher probability of being above normal for temperature, equal chances for precipitation. You can see that that above normal for precipitation there starts to fade in the desert Southwest because we're getting out of monsoon season. Again, monsoon season's July, August really, so that starts to fade away. But that's even showing still gives me concern because that means August could be very monsoony. So we'll have to watch that really closely. As we get into the core of fire season, so September, October, November, and again October is kind of our core. Still higher probability of being above normal for temperature across our area. So this is a concern. That means anything that has moisture left is going to continue to cure very well. And hopefully we don't have big heat waves because that can cure the heavier fuels very well too. Equal chances for precipitation. The nice part about this is we see that below shift even farther east. That means there might be some kind of storm system potentially coming in October, November as we get into the Pacific Northwest, as we get into that time frame that could potentially clip us and bring us some precipitation. So that's what we're always hoping for, is some good precipitation as we get into October to shut down fire season. So let's get into some other current conditions across the area. There are some orientation that I want to give you because we're going to talk about the geographical area coordination centers for the U.S. Forest Service. The North Ops is up in Redding, the South Ops is down there in Riverside, and they have their zones too. And we're going to look at a few of them, like NCO2. This is Mendocino to Midcoast to Mendocino. And then we'll look at the East Bay and Santa Cruz Mountains. And then we'll look at Central Coast and Central Coast Interior. So just to kind of give you an idea what we're going to be looking at in terms of dryness of fuels. A little bit of orientation to these charts. This is the energy release component. I like to think about it as like how much energy do the fuels have to carry fire. So the more energy that is listed here, the more readily these fuels can carry fire. So now on the chart here, the gray background line here, that gray line is an average. So that's over the climatological period, and you'll see those in the top parts of the charts. The red line is the max that has been observed during that climatological period, and the blue is what we are observing this year. And then this little green here is a forecast out over the next 7 days. So you can see we've bounced around a lot over the course of this year. We came close to touching the max line up the mid-coast to Mendocino area. And we are about average. So not bad, but we're also going to warm up. So the forecast is continue to dry out. What we don't want to do is reach these red lines or exceed these red lines earlier than we need to. So if we end up at the top of this green line, we can drag this out over to where it meets the gray line and come down. So we are going to be looking at essentially mid-June averages by the time we get into the next week or so. And we're only in mid-May, mid-late May. So we're running about two to 3 weeks ahead of schedule, it looks like, for North Bay. So we get into the Diablo Range of Santa Cruz Mountains. You can see the same type of thing, right around average, but that green line's going up as we hit into a warm, dry period. and we're starting to approach that red line as well, so that's no good. As we get down in the central coast, it's done by South Ops now, right around that average line, but again, a warming trend, and we see that green line starting to go up. And we look at the central coast, so this is right along the coastline. This is the interior. This is the right along the coastline, and look at that green line. The forecast, the blue line's right around average right now, but that green line has the forecast shooting up. So these don't have great trends, but we are going into summer, so we do expect drying. I just wish that we could hang around average longer, but we'll see how it goes. So the United States Forest Service Geographic Area Coordination Center does put out a forecast as well for the fire season, and this is the North Ops bullet points for their May through August forecast. And really kind of the main one here is the bottom bold here. It just says significant fire potential is projected to be normal for May, then trending near to above normal during June through August. So that's not great. You know, of course, it's favoring areas away from the coast. These forecasts are issued the first of every month. So this one was from May 1st. So we'll get another one June 1st. This is what the map looks like describing that forecast there. So here in May, for significant fire potential, we're normal. And normal doesn't mean we're without fires. It just means that the risk is lower this time of year. That's more normal, that we have low risk. But as we go into June, as that last bullet said there in bold on the last slide, you can see those reds creep in. That means we have an above normal significant fire potential risk in June, and then that carries right on through July and August. When the next forecast comes out, the first of next month, we'll see September drop into these charts as well, and I expect that red to expand just a little bit more. So we'll see how the marine layer and the marine influence, our June gloom, our no sky July, and our fogist really help to mitigate some of the lowland fire threats. South Ops, the ones out of Riverside, they handle Monterey County, San Benito County, and here are their bullet points. So really kind of, again, just the last bullet, any potential large fires in lower elevations are likely to be grass and fine field dominated, while potential large fires in the mountain areas are likely to be timber dominated. Just kind of giving an idea. And remember, they also go into the Sierra as well. So when they're talking timber, they're talking some of those big trees. So looking at May here, again, normal, and then we get into June, and you start to see above normal creep into San Benito and eastern Monterey County there. And then by the time we get into July, our entire Central Coast portion of our service area drops into being above normal, and that remains right on through August. So not looking great for the risk of significant fire potential. So now let's talk about a couple other things as we go forward. You probably heard a lot about it with the Palisades and Eaton fires down in Southern California, the particularly dangerous situation, the PDS. The PDS is not a product per se that we issue, but it's something that we designate as a header on our fire weather forecast. And these are meant to be the extreme cases, and these are meant to be the cases that don't happen every year. So if we think back in our service area, you know, like the Oakland Hills fire would have been a PDS. The North Bay fires with Tubbs and Nuns, that would have been a PDS. Kincaid, following Kincaid on the ground, that weekend of a lot of wind and very dry conditions, that would have been a PDS. So they don't happen every year, but they do come around every so often. So hopefully you will never see a PDS in your life, but odds are that you probably will for your area. So just be cognizant that if we say it's a particularly dangerous situation, it just means that there is a risk of potentially explosive fire growth. So we'll highlight it in social media and through our webpage with images like this. And so you'll see purple. We'll have a red flag warning out, but it will carry the particularly dangerous situation header on it, and we'll highlight it purple in our calls to action within our social media posts and whatnot. And it's just the extreme risk. So speaking of socials, we are on the three majors, the Xer, the Facebooker, and the YouTubers. So we're at NWS Bay Area on all of them. We do have an IG account, but we aren't active on it right now, and we'll probably become more active as time goes by. Web resources. Typically, I take you through a show and tell here, but these are kind of your main places to go for information. That first link, that's our homepage, weather.gov/Bay Area. Weather.gov/forecast points is a great place to get easy to look at forecast graphics. Heat risk here. The heat risk will give you an idea of the potential heat vulnerabilities to populations across the area, and it's based upon our forecast and climatology. And cooked in also is the CDC morbidity data when people expire from heat. At what temperatures do they expire? That's all cooked in. So heat risk is a very, very powerful tool. CPC here, Climate Prediction Center, that's where I pull off all the seasonal graphics. So you can go there and look at them on your own. And then the GAC, NFC, ONCC, and OSCC, those are the two places where you can see the United States Forest Service's fire season outlook. And with that, that's it. Hey, thanks for taking a little bit of time. I know it's been over 20 minutes of talking. I hope this was informational. Hopefully it was helpful, and we'll do some updates throughout the summer as the forecast changes. For now, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and be good to one another. See you, everybody.